Hi, I'm Maria Theohara Silvello on social media. Welcome back to Sober 50 podcast on Soul Organized Style. Grab a cuppa and relax with us. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we record this podcast and pay respects to the elders past and present. Many thanks for the ongoing support from the Patreon community for Soul Organized Style podcast. Your ongoing support every month keeps me developing these podcasts so you and our listeners can hear from sewers from all walks of life. So Over 50 intersects with all sewing communities. We're a community that is so over ageism. Our focus is the sewing talent each person shares on social media and providing recognition of their willingness to share their skills, whether a beginner or an experienced sewist. Diane, or at Style Falcon, who is the owner of Style Falcon Patterns, is today's Sober 50 podcast guest. Diane of Style Falcon Patterns has done some investigation into the Instagram scams that keep happening to us. And today's podcast focuses on what Diane has discovered and how Diane now takes some simple steps to protect her accounts. Thank you for inviting me into your home today, Diane.
Thanks for having me, Maria. It's always great to talk to you.
I think the last time we spoke would have been at Frocktails in Edinburgh.
Yes. What a night.
I know.
That was the most fun I'd had in 3 years. That was such a blast.
It was great. I know. And I think we still have to make up the same fabric that we bought, as well as Judith. She bought the same print.
That's right. We should do that. Yeah, it was because we were in Scotland. A bunch of us bought this really pretty thistle print. They came in a couple different colorways. I got the purple and green, and it's a shirting. And I thought that thistle print that we bought in Edinburgh will be perfect for this pattern I have in development. I'm looking forward to trying it out when I've got that ready to go.
So listeners, Diane of Style Falcon Patterns, she's been doing some investigation into the Instagram scams that keep happening. And there were quite a lot of us who, before Christmas, there was a deluge, wasn't there?
A bunch of us got hit and continue to be, I've noticed. Every day it seems like somebody's putting out there that their profile's been duplicated, or there's a bogus profile out there that's using their profile picture and a very, very similar username, and they alert everybody to what's going on. And we try to block it and we report it to Instagram, and maybe that one goes like mushrooms after the rain. They just keep popping up.
It seems that it happens and it's a shock when it happens, a real shock. And I took it personally, but these people, they don't do it on a personal level. This is just their normal business.
The first time it happened to me, I had an Instagram account several years ago. And shortly after I created it, I got inundated with these requests or these follows from what looked like all of these men. And they would have a profile picture that would have, it was always some man that was either a doctor or a military officer of some kind, or then oddly enough, sometimes a military doctor, as if, I don't know, there's some stupid person out there who thinks that women are just dying for men in uniform, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what the heck that is all about. But I didn't really understand what was going on at the time. And I'm like, I don't like these men. I don't know who they are. Like, I was used to Facebook, and Facebook, I know everybody. I'm not friends with strangers on Facebook, but Instagram, there are these strangers. And I'm like, I don't like this. And I closed my account and I said, Instagram's not for me. And then, years later, I started it up again because I really came to understand that these so-called men, they're not actual people. They're just these bots. They're just these bogus profiles that have been created out there for fraudulent purposes, truly. And that there are legions of them, and that they're just created automatically. There's some person behind it, but each one that's being created it's just automated, is what I discovered. And there are a couple of massive problems with this for the user that are not a massive problem for Instagram, because part of what Instagram needs to do, or Meta, which owns Instagram and Facebook and a bunch of other companies, is that they need to demonstrate that they have a lot of users and that the users are active. And it's part of their business model is to get more and more users all the time. So they have these bogus profiles while they say that they don't want them and that they do everything they can to eliminate them. I don't know how true that is, because they're everywhere. There's estimates that up to a quarter of the so-called profiles that are out there are bogus, especially people who are celebrities who have, these massive followings of millions of followers, that up to a quarter of those followers are just these bogus bots. It is fraud. And usually what the purpose of it is to create a profile that looks like a real profile. And they think that if they can get real people, such as you and me, Maria, to follow them, then it will look like a real profile. And then that profile in turn has some sort of value as an audience that they can potentially get some gain from to make it look like there are more actual people out there than there should be, whoever these fraudsters are who are creating this. And then it's also used sometimes to try to pretend that you're somebody you know so that you can get something out of them. You can get information out of them. There are these romance scams, which I think is part of the whole men in uniform nonsense. And I think that they specifically target older women for this. And there are scams to try to get money out of people or to get personal information out of you. And I don't think it's going to go away. I don't know how serious Instagram really is about eliminating it, but you can't depend on Instagram to eliminate it. You have to do it yourself.
So when we spoke, there were a couple of steps that you took to make sure that you cleaned up the amount of followers that you had based on that percentage that certain amount are going to be bogus followers. What did you do?
The first thing I did is I went through all of my followers, and I do this routinely now every week or so. I try to do it every day if something comes through that's obviously bogus, but otherwise every week or so I take a little look at all my followers, and there's a couple of things I look for. The first is the pictures of these phony men, these military men and these doctors. I don't think that there's too many men who are really following Style Falcon legitimately. There are some, and I know them, I know who they are. So the second that I see a profile picture that has this man in it, I look at the profile, and often you can tell if that profile will be following a lot of people, but will have very few followers itself. That's like the number one hint that something isn't right. Part of this automated bot creation thing that goes on is they will just take someone's username and they'll just stick numbers on the end of it. You may know that, let's say you try to start a new account on Instagram and my name's Diane. So let's say I wanted my profile name to be Diane. Well, Diane's been taken a long time ago. So it will automatically recommend Diane with a bunch of numbers after. And that's a dead giveaway that is a bogus account. If I see those kind of things, that's something I look for. The next thing that you look for is if somebody tries to send you a private message, a dead giveaway that is not a person, that's just a bot. And usually the private message, or if they even leave a message, a comment on a post or something you've done, that comment's always generic. Let's say you sew a new blouse and you put a picture of yourself on Instagram in the blouse. And someone puts a comment, but comment isn't actually about sewing or your blouse or anything. It's just, you have a nice smile, something bogus like that. That person's no good. Or that bot, it's probably not an actual person. It's probably just a bot. When I see those things, I do two things. I block that person or that entity. The second thing I do is I remove follower. And to do that, what you have to do is you have to look at their profile. And then there are some options that come up if you click on in the upper right-hand corner, the three dots. Those are the two things to do, is to block them and remove follower. And you can remove any followers you want anyway. A lot of people don't realize that, but you can. When I did this, I removed, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 of them or something like that in one go over, I don't know, maybe it took me 20 minutes or something to go through my account and remove quite a lot of them. And it felt so good, Maria. I felt like I was just taking a tiny step against fraud and the rest of it on Instagram.
You sent me an article about one of the things to look for. So I've changed how I write comments now. I used to say great or that's really good. Now I actually have to say that's a really great style that you're wearing rather than good pick or nice job or wow. Because I think the other thing too is if you know that person, you need to give them some sort of feedback that you know them and that you are actually taking care about what you're telling them.
I think that's a really great point, Maria. And I think we all appreciate that, don't we, on Instagram when we get a more personal message. That's a great idea. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to try that myself a little more often.
I did get some feedback. When your account gets cloned, it's a fake account, and you report it, I learned that you don't just report that the account is trying to impersonate you, but you also report it for copyright infringement, especially if they use your name. Mm-hmm. And if they use your images, because you own those. While you put them on Instagram, you own them. So you can report it because it's a fake, a scam, and also it's copyright infringement.
I think that's another really great tip. And it's true that sometimes these bots will take your profile picture and everything. And that is actually what happened to me at one point. And it just felt like this weird violation that my picture was out there, and it's not an actual person doing it. It's just this automated thing. And so if it makes you feel a little better, it will probably happen to you at some point, probably to all of us, to be able to say that, to say, hey, there's a copyright infringement going on here. I mean, to allege that there's a crime taking place, because there is, from what you're seeing anyway. And I think that helps get people's attention. Something else that I do is I periodically go through Instagram and look for Style Falcon. That's my username on Instagram. And when I chose the name Style Falcon, quite a lot of work went into it. And one of the things I did is I made sure that there wasn't an Instagram Style Falcon already, or that term wasn't really out there for, search engine purposes and everything. It really wasn't. The only thing you would get is occasionally, the people who are into falconry, where they hunt with birds. That would sometimes show up, and it has absolutely zero to do with sewing, right? So I thought, okay, that's fine. Very shortly after I created the Style Falcon account, all of these kind of sort of Style Falcon accounts appeared out of nowhere, again, like mushrooms after the rain. And there are several of them that are out there now. And I think they're selling clothing of some kind or something. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with them. One of them was actually using my picture and everything. And they did style_falcon. And that one was a big problem for me to get rid of. But I reported it, I blocked it, and I encouraged other people to report it also. It did disappear. That one hasn't reappeared, but different versions of something similar have reappeared. And it's kind of something that you have to live with if they're not literally copying you, but it pays to be aware of what's out there and be a little vigilant. Sort of like if you're walking down a dark alley, you look both ways before you enter. Something unfortunately you have to do. It's good to be in the habit of doing it so it doesn't become like a big thing or become like really stressful. For me, I found.
The good thing that I found from my experience in December when this happened was I was notified by someone in the Save 50 community that there was someone that had cloned my account. And when I put the note out to everyone that it was fake, so many people told me that they reported it. And I think if I wasn't part of the Save 50 community, I'm not sure that many people would have reported it on my behalf as well.
That's true. And thank goodness for our community that we do have each other's backs. It's one of the many things that are awesome about it. A couple other options I was going to mention from the research that I did is you can create a private account if you like in Instagram. And if you have a private account, you can have people that will follow you and you can follow them. But if you post something, it doesn't go out to the world. It does just go out to your followers. I have some friends, I have quite a few actually, who that's the kind of account that they have because they are concerned about their privacy. And that's great. And the way that you can recognize them is if you look at their profile, it will say that it's a private account. And those profiles usually don't have a lot of followers because they're private. They only want to connect with a few people. So if you look at their grid, you will see, pictures that are more like the kind of stuff that we would post if you're connected with them. So you can try that. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that it is important to remove bogus followers if you come across them, because in the algorithmic world of Instagram, if you have a lot of bogus followers, Instagram may begin to think that your account itself is bogus. Because that's one of the things that happens is these bots follow each other and it feeds on itself. It'll probably improve your standing in the world of Instagram if you have real followers instead of a lot of fake followers. And it's a really big problem, as I mentioned, for celebrities who up to like a quarter of their so-called followers are just, these nonsense bots. And then the other thing that happens sometimes is that they'll actually just spoof a famous person. Like I think it was Prince Harry was following, like a bogus Prince Harry was following me at one point. And I thought, wow, okay, at least I could have a chuckle on that one.
That would have been an interesting experience.
Yeah.
We talked about evaluating the type of profile of people who are following you to see that they are bots and not real people. Reading the comments that people make to make sure that these are people that you know or are interested in you and not just bots. Looking at their posts. That's the other thing. I was looking at these bots, and if they were following my personal account and it had nothing to do with sewing, I just block them, because why would they bother following me?
Mm-hmm.
It made no sense to me.
Yeah. If they only have a couple pictures in their grid and it's all pictures of puppies and sunsets and stuff like that, that's really usually a dead giveaway.
I don't have anything against sunsets or puppies, but it just doesn't make sense,
Me
right?
neither. Yeah, I mean they're trying to just make themselves look as innocuous as possible, but we're not fooled.
No, not at all. And look, I have to thank you, Diane, because when you sent me the article and you sent me your notes, I actually went through my own personal account as well
Hmm,
as the podcast account, and I removed quite a few people. I actually felt a lot more safer, like I was actually doing something on my behalf. And that helps people who follow me because I'm protecting them as well.
right. That's a good point. I agree. It does help the overall health of our community. So it's worthwhile. And it really doesn't take that long. And it becomes like a game of, I don't know, hide and seek or something, you know. So I every week, as I say, I go through and I remove some. And then sometimes as they come in, I just remove them instantly. The notification pops up and I'm like, nope.
Exactly. Even when you're looking at people who are putting requests in, and then there are those hidden messages that come up as well,
Mm.
it always pays to have a look at those and decide that those hidden messages are probably bots anyway. So just get rid of them.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody ever tries to get any personal information out of you, if anyone ever suggests you meet up or they say they need money or anything like that, you absolutely know that they don't have your best interest at heart.
That's true.
The other thing is that often a couple of weeks will go by where I'll hardly get any of these bots. And then suddenly I get a ton of them. And I think that we've seen rounds of that, Maria, where a bunch of people's accounts will get spoofed and then for a while it'll be quiet. And so I do think that it feeds on itself a little bit. If you find that you have a moment when this isn't happening to you, don't get complacent because it will probably come around again. Something someone else mentioned, which I haven't tried myself, is to have your profile picture not be your face. Have a picture of an object or something that it doesn't make it clear that you're a person, just your little profile picture, or at least that you're not a woman, and that has helped reduce it. And I haven't tried that personally, but there are some people who told me that that's worked for them.
There are quite a few Sober 50 followers who have pictures of objects, like you say, because they kept getting bombarded so much with these bots. And I think they're a lot happier for it. It doesn't stop it. It keeps happening, but gives you a bit of a reprieve.
Yeah, or at least you know that your face isn't out there being misused.
Exactly. Yeah. Any last suggestions for our listeners before we wrap up today's podcast?
I think I just say know that you're not alone, that it is unfortunately part of using Instagram and being out there in the world, but it's not personal. And there are steps you can do to protect yourself and to be wise to what's going on and to also protect others.
Definitely to protect yourself and to protect others. Great. Diane, thank you for coming onto the podcast again. I know that you're busy with Stella Falcon patterns, that there are going to be more patterns released this year, but getting this message out on how to protect yourself and others on Instagram is really important for people to listen to.
Thanks, Maria. I'm so glad that you suggested that we get together and talk, and I'm delighted to talk to you again today. See you on Instagram.
Thanks, Diane.
Thanks, Maria.
This episode of Sober 50 podcast on Soul Organized Style was produced by me, Maria Theoharis, with permission of Diane of Style Falcon Patterns. Sound by bensound.com. Listeners, please direct message Judith and Sandy at Sober 50 to give them your support for the Sober 50 account. As you know, Judith is undertaking some interesting research that I know you'll want to help her out with. If you have time, also let Judith and Sandy know how you'd like to support Sober 50 behind the scenes this year. Sober 50 Live for Sober 50 account with Bird and Molly continues this year. You can subscribe to Soul Organized Style podcast, but with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps. If you are a YouTube person, a library of Soul Organized Style podcasts are being loaded onto the YouTube account with a few visuals to really show you what we're chatting about. Make sure you go back and listen to our free Sober 50 podcast archive, and if you can, consider supporting the production of this podcast on Patreon. We look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.